since we're all here, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back, everyone. We are in our last series of presentations for the forum, and I'm going to turn things over to Jamie to introduce our next session.
Great, thanks, Jessica. Our next presentation is Receipts or It Didn't Happen, Documenting Reference for Institutional Memory. Our presenters are Amelia Bathke, Reference Archivist and Cat Mom, and Leah Constantine, Archive Senior Manager and Dog Mom. Archivist from the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts Archive, Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts Archive, will co-present on how research and reference are documented in ArchivesSpace using events to establish institutional knowledge of its actions. Amelia Bathke joined LCPA in 2024 as a reference archivist and manages the communication, workflows, and documentation related to material requests. Leah Constantine joined LCPA in 2021 and is currently the Senior Archives Manager, managing collection processing and the administration of ArchivesSpace. Amelia and Leah are dedicated to improving material use and supporting the transmission of knowledge from one generation of archivists to another, using ArchivesSpace's features to manage controlled values and create events in parallel with a project management and document storage system. Thanks very much. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen so that I can get our presentation up. You guys see that okay?
Yep.
Hooray. That off. So thank you for joining us for Receipts or Didn't Happen, Documenting Reference for Institutional Memory. I am the aforementioned Amelia, cat mom, cat dad, really more accurately. So in studying and learning from past practices, as a reference archivist, the reason that I am particularly interested in using events in ArchivesSpace to track reference is to integrate that institutional knowledge into the catalog and collection, rather than letting it remain an ephemeral thing that disappears with individual archivists as they come and go. Institutional knowledge is critical to a lot of archival work, so we can find ways to build it into the collection. And in that, it can become more concrete and harder to lose. Keeping a record of past reference requests is not a new concept, and we have examples of past attempts in our collection as well. While processing archives or records, we came across boxes of old reference questions from the 90s and 2000s when our archive was young, which you can see on the right here are full to the brim with papers relating to early requests. And inside each of those folders is dozens of these forms, some with email correspondence stapled on and some not. And even though from looking at the box itself, you can likely tell that they exist a little bit more to keep record than to be used as a resource, we can still learn from what could work and what doesn't when recording reference. Like, it's good that a record exists at all and that we can see where the request is coming from, who worked on it, what items from the collection were used. However, there's no convenient way to search these records unless you know a specific question was asked on a specific date. And though there's space for a summary, in practice, it was kind of often written too simply to make too much sense of. And again, the primary goal of this record keeping was to keep track of what was going where, to whom, and when. And our goal is to use the tools at hand that we have to make record keeping as effective and usable as possible when it comes to reference. So we can not only track the amount of work that we do, but be able to utilize our work as a tool moving forward.
Hi, everyone. This is Leah speaking. So I want to share our workflow for reference in ArchivesSpace and how it includes using its catalog to its fullest. I chose to use events for this workflow because by definition, an event record describes an action involving a selected object in the archival repository and an agent. We want to see how our archival objects contribute to outreach and research in tracking the actions as events. Additionally, we are mindful that not every reference request is an action item requiring an event. Scaling our work and reducing redundancies makes the workflow more useful. We should know how much work is too much work. While existing events work fine, as system administrator, I was able to customize our events to enhance our workflows. Those customizations rely heavily on managing controlled value lists for events. By creating an event type for reference, it allows us to combine the traditional use of events with our custom needs to track reference by archival object and agent per the event definition and the two most important fields for reference details. As we continue using events for our various needs, we can explore new features to enhance custom events and share them with the development prioritization team and ArchivesSpace members. You're muted.
I am muted. The Lincoln Center for Performing Arts Archive. We wanted to be able to utilize the ability to customize events and keep track of when records are used in the archives and for what purpose, which led to the idea of tracking reference work as events. Much of library work is already invisible and underappreciated labor, and within that, reference archivists can often be seen as either kind of magically having the answer to people's questions or just pulling records for patrons to look at. In reality, as we all likely know, a lot of research and analysis goes into reference work. We're consulting multiple records to find the right item, or scouring 3, 4, 5 boxes at once to gather information, and doing research along with patrons to ensure their questions get answered and they have the resources they need for their projects. So in tracking reference in ArchivesSpace, we can utilize those the events as a tool that make research easier for us and let the work build upon itself. But before a reference request event gets to the stage where we record it in ArchivesSpace, it has a whole life cycle that I will take you through that helps us determine what ultimately gets recorded in ArchivesSpace and helps us track the effort and time that goes into doing reference. Before we get too into the process, I'll quickly go over our toolbox. Lincoln Center uses the project management software Monday to track projects and work. Our department uses it as well for our own work, and we've configured a way to receive and record reference questions and emails. We also have our digital asset manager, Orange Logic, that we just call the DAM, for our digitized and board digital items, and we use shareable virtual folders from there to give patrons access to specific assets when the situation calls for it. So when someone sends an email to our department address, it automatically creates a ticket in Monday that includes their email address, the original email body, and the subject of their email creates a ticket title, and a ticket number is also automatically generated. For this example, I created a mock request based on a real one, so any personal information about the patron isn't included, and it doesn't include any information that isn't publicly accessible already, because this work is primarily for internal reference. And from here, we're given the option to send the ticket to one of our other boards based on the kind of work needing to be done. Since this person was asking about the former chairman of the campaign committee and just wants more information about his contribution to the institution, it will go to research. Here is where we gather the information and gather the records that we'll be looking at and consulting. And we keep track of all items, all materials used. So this includes items that we pull that end up having nothing to do or nothing related inside, because that's also work and we want it to be seen. We have this research evaluation button, so we can designate each item by their usefulness to answering the question. When I use this and when I'm pulling these records, I'm mostly pulling directly from ArchivesSpace, though we do have an inventory spreadsheet that I sometimes pull from. But as you can see, we can include all of the information that we see in our catalog, the location, the box number, scope and content, all of that good stuff. And I lost my space. So yeah, so sometimes it's a very specific record, and other times it's just kind of a box of like press releases or photographs that we kind of dig through the entire thing. And so now we've gathered all of the materials. Oh, sorry, I forgot to actually mention quickly. We do distinguish between useful information, light green, and requester wants dark green. In a ticket like this, I would be doing more narrative responses. So I wouldn't be as likely to be sending any information or any digital assets to the patron. Requester wants is primarily for when we send digital assets, or if they want to use like a photograph in their project, it kind of tracks more of what goes out. So that's the difference between those. So once we've gathered all materials and assessed them for relevance, responded to the requester told them all about the campaign committee and the chairman's contributions. Congratulations. You've just completed your first reference task at Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts Archives. Your ticket is now ready to be added to ArchivesSpace. And here in ArchivesSpace, I would create a new event right from the homepage, which would take me to this new events page. And I can choose from drop-down menus that would allow me to label this type of event as reference, include where I'm at in the ticket. Usually by this point it's completed, but you can see in progress is an option as well. And in the outcome note, this is where I put the ticket number that was generated when it came into Monday. So I can refer back to that, all the work that I did on it. I can also so that gives me the context for the mini collection that I created, and that's easily available. I can also include the date that the ticket came in and was completed, and I can add myself as an agent, as the researcher, and add my name so people can know that I worked on this and ask me questions about it. So now for the best part, the linking the records. These records that I'm linking in ArchivesSpace, I'm pulling directly from Monday that I use to track my work. The only difference is that since I've tracked all the records I've consulted in my process, in ArchivesSpace, I can exclude the ones that ended up not being useful or got the revisit. And in this, I choose the role as source, and I can search. For here, I searched the scope and content because there's a specific folder that I was looking at, and that will come up, and that will be the linked record. One issue I've run into when doing this is, so when we're doing the research in Monday, we're kind of doing a scatter shot of materials. And sometimes what I'm pulling is an entire box to look at. And I can link to a top container in ArchivesSpace, but this event won't show up when looking at the top container. And the sources, as you can see in the bottom left here, will turn up empty. So these two empty sources are top containers that are linked, and the top two are specific records that are linked. So now, if you happen to search the same or a related topic, here I search the committee chair's name and you filter by events. You'll see all of events that contained link records related to that search. At the moment, there's no way to title events in ArchivesSpace, so in this view, it can be difficult to tell whether both of these or only one of these is relevant to the search without clicking view and going into the event itself. But the events are also viewable in each of the linked records as long as it's an individual record. And now we can use this, we can see every time it was used, each record was used in an event for reference. So once this event is created, you can save it, and congratulations, you've added an event now. And now that reference requests can be used as a tool in future requests or to see how often a specific record was chosen and can be used as a tool in the future.
So I want to quickly share another case study for reference events that shows what events can track. Our internal staff rely on our digital archive supported in our digital asset management system to access materials for research and use. However, we are just like most of you. Our archive is not fully digitized or even mostly digitized. So viewing digital assets of ephemera like posters, stage bills, magazines, and more in the DAM, while it is convenient and the first instinct for most of our staff, it doesn't actually represent the full scope of the materials we can present. The best inspiration comes from in-person exchanges and access to original materials. Creating reference events tracks materials that are selected for in-person reference and research and are used to inspire staff work, like our design team. When staff need more than one visit to the archive or want to cite the materials for their research for future use, the reference event in ArchivesSpace has that information already documented with the archival objects. In January 2025, the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts design team visited the archive to explore materials for past public programming events. I shared posters, stage bills, magazines, buttons, and more from our ephemera that led to thorough discussions and inspiring exchanges. The visit with the design team resulted in them being able to see colors, concepts, and styles that prepared them for the planning of this year's Summer for the City events. The designers also discovered materials with similarities between this year's Summer for the Cities theme and themes from LCPA's past. The designers saw themselves in context with the archive as contributors to LCPA history and considered the greater impact of archiving their work. Archive staff can now track the objects for instances where continued research for the design team is needed during their creative process. By providing the materials for reference and having a method of tracking those materials, we have provided the staff a trusted resource for regular creative inspiration in the archive. This is a new workflow for us in the archive, which means we have a lot to look forward to in its use. Here we'll look at statistics and future proofing for continued improvements. So looking forward, as system administrator, I create feature requests based on staff feedback and use cases for improving our instance of ArchivesSpace. Some of those features I have highlighted here. I created a request for the addition of titles in the basic information for events. The feature request for titles was recently closed, but as we learned from yesterday's DevPre meeting, it's about universal relevance and use cases. So this is something to consider in the future as our use of events grows continually and we share it with members. Another new feature request that is currently open is the ability to see events in top containers. In several cases, entire boxes are pulled for reference and transfers and conservation and more. And seeing these events in the top container detailed view would make information more accessible for staff who are browsing those boxes. Additionally, I have a ticket open for a bug that I noticed when creating custom values for event types. The issue of not translating the value results in this error string, but does not have any effect on the event records besides visual appearance. Thanks to the DevPre team for continuing to look into this. So in ArchivesSpace, viewing the list of reference events currently looks like this. There's little information differentiating the events for use, and it has a lot of information in one view that can be confusing for users. When browsing the event, I'll be able to view events in the list to specifically see the date and notes that affiliate it with the reference event instance. The event highlighted in red represents the design team visit, but there is nothing to specify that in this list. So our current challenge is seeing these in view. There can be a lot of back and forth in this current method of browsing events. When viewing an event resource, I can see that I pulled an entire container for the design reference event, and I listed it in my record links. A feature that we believe would be helpful in seeing better details of events would be to have events for top containers linked in the top container view. I've also explored the use of creating custom reports, which I learned how to do because of attending ArchivesSpace training workshops, and it helped with ideas for enhancing workflows like this. So shout out to those trainings. The custom report will download just our reference events with numbers and create creation details sorted by date and agent. I'm sure there are many other ArchivesSpace administrative skills that I can learn in forums and trainings, and I'm looking forward to applying those skills to our custom uses in our work. Our custom events are used in other unofficial workflows to document when materials are in licensing, in exhibit use, in conservation, and for location transfers of our top containers. So basically anything related to an action stays with the archival resource as an event record. We believe that as more members utilize events in ArchivesSpace, we can enhance its features for the future.
Unmute myself. So the average tenure for libraries, archives, and museum employees as a whole is about 5 years, which is like a little over a year longer than the national average, but that's still not very long. This means less retention of institutional knowledge, something that's already very ephemeral, as archivists come and go more frequently. Those doing reference will often have to start from scratch in their research rather than building upon knowledge, and response times may increase and errors may become more frequent. Tracking reference work in Monday shows the value and time of our labor and effort and expertise that goes into doing that research. And we can see all of the work that we do, and we have very concrete evidence of it. Tracking events in ArchivesSpace helps create pathways and narratives throughout the collection, building something ephemeral into a concrete web of knowledge. It makes ArchivesSpace better reflect the living and learning nature of a collection, while helping it to become a tool future archivists can use to tap into the institutional knowledge, not just of an individual archivist, but a knowledge that we're all actively contributing to and building into the foundation of the catalog. So. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Thank you
Awkward
both
silence.
so much. Well, we'll go ahead and open the floor to Q&A. We do already have one question in the Q&A. And that, well, now I need to find my Q&A screen. There we go. Emily asks or says, I love the idea of linking reference events to collections and individual materials. And then Emily does ask, are these events published in the PUI or are they only available on the back end for internal use? I'll let you answer and then I can answer a little about events.
I can quickly answer that. I'll reflect what Arlene, you said. We keep this internal and private because we do not want any possible publicly identifying information to be shared public. And we also want our public view to just remain about the archival materials, and our staff instance will be able to track that information with unpublished events.
And I think people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think events cannot be published to the PUI anyway, so they are internal or on the staff side only, just in general, but that isn't to say a plugin couldn't make that possible. Elizabeth says, what inspired you to look to ArchivesSpace for tracking reference rather than using a program already tailored to that sort of work, like it sounds like Monday is?
Yeah, I can answer the first half of that. Well, the work is tracked in Monday, but the archival materials are not tracked in Monday. So anytime a material is used for any reason, we'd like it to stay with the intellectual representation of that material in ArchivesSpace. A lot of times our Monday will track just the work to get something done, even if that doesn't result in a final product. And that can be a lot of information. So as we continue to use these resources, we want to have that in ArchivesSpace. Another reason is this is our second, since I've been working at Lincoln Center, the second time a task management software has been used. So I don't see Monday as being as permanent as ArchivesSpace. So just for the future of archivists, I would like them to be able to see that within the object tracked in ArchivesSpace.
That's a really good point. Using ArchivesSpace as the system of record for that. Anton asks, can anyone with admin status change the controlled value list for your event types? So who has access to that?
I do have access to that. I think it is those with the high level admin. And Anton, I can show you sometime. I think I know who this Anton is.
Okay.
But yes, if you go to manage control values, the one issue is that there are a lot of places where you can create custom values. So it can get a little disorienting when you get there. But if you go to manage controlled values in the view and you go to event underscore type, you'll be able to see the place where you can add that information.
Thank you. There are 3 other questions in the chat. In the interest of time, let's go ahead and wrap up. But if you, well, now there are 4. If you wouldn't mind, if you could type your answers there. But I do want to just highlight what Sarah says in her question, that she loves the idea of making the institutional knowledge part of the collection in this way. I think this is really interesting use of events. So I appreciate you sharing it. And I just wanted to echo what Sarah said there. But thank you both so much. This is really interesting. And there's also some comments in the chat about this. I think it's a great way to use events and a great way to highlight that information. So thank you so much for this presentation. That was great. But we are going to go ahead and move on to our last session of